Let me tell you what happened to Uno, Mr. Government. Uno just begs because and Uno just find it first. And Uno find the container freezer there with the heap of chicken. And Uno and a friend them find it first. So Uno just begs and Uno do everything in our power for we go take it and fling it away. We now fling it away as a matter of fact. To the ship and to the people and when this drop off. Uno can't do this if I even once a week. If I even once a week, fling out one container rice, fling out one container corned beef, fling out one container flour, fling out one container everything and make sure so we can get it.
Now, the last thing I want to cover in terms of this chicken is, the containers in which these particular type of chicken come in. Now, as you know, when you're transporting cargo of this type on ships, you have different types of what you call these metric ton containers. And they come in various types, and the type that sort of transport food and meat and stuff like that is what is referred to as reefer containers, but we're not talking about the high grade right now. So the reefer type containers is basically used to transport meat because they're temperature controlled, they're refrigerated in that respect, or frozen. They're typically watertight as well. So the container can float for weeks, even months at sea, provided the hull or the outer bit of it isn't damaged in any way that would let water in and it becomes waterlogged. And that's another thing. A lot of hygiene people or food experts actually went as far as to say, when you prepare chicken, you shouldn't wash it. I wash my chicken, but some people say you shouldn't wash your chicken or you shouldn't make water touch the chicken. Now, when it comes to seawater and sort of, chicken like this, I'm not sure and I can only imagine that it would just breed more bacteria, to be honest. So that's one thing you have to bear in mind. The other thing is a lot of these, chicken in particular, you can get stuff like salmonella from it, which is very dangerous. There's no joke getting salmonella poisoning from chicken or contaminated chicken. You can also get E. coli from it, which is another serious bacterial, fungusy, whatever you can get from chicken. There's also Listeria erysipelas that you can get as well. And there's a very complex name called Campylobacter. Let me try and pause and get this name because I can never get this correctly. And I know I'm going to butcher it, but I'll try anyway. It's Campylobacteriosis. I hope I pronounced that correctly. The scientists can come in and correct me if I pronounced it wrong. But yeah, that's a long word. For those who want to look it up, it's spelled Pylobacteriosis. Okay, so that's what that is. I'm not quite sure about it. I'm not the scientific person in terms of food hygiene and so on. But yeah, you need to bear this type of stuff in mind when you're consuming meat, especially potentially contaminated meat. This is no joke. The other thing I want to mention as well is the fact that this mysterious container showed up on the beach of Hellshire in Jamaica, which I found to be very, very odd. Now, as far as I can tell, there was no coast guards, there was no police around when this stuff beached up against the shores in Hellshire. And during the raid from the locals who came out to raid the containers, no police or coast guard showed up then during that situation, and then maybe after they've showed up, but it's too late. They're going to show up to a skeletal situation where people just left remnants what they don't want. There's no quick response team, which got my brain thinking, if a whole container can wash up on shore in Jamaica and the coast guard or the police or no one with a quick response or the different teams of Jamaica are that secure their borders didn't see this big massive container floating towards them, coming up onto the beach and beaching up, and they're completely unaware and oblivious of it. What that tells me is that Jamaica is vulnerable to foreign military attack, because the same way this king can just suddenly show up is the same way hundreds of troops could just show up. How many people could hold in a typical container like that? Do you understand me? So imagine that show up with refugees or people that's from Haiti or wherever else, or military personnel. There's no border control, it seems, where stuff just floating willy-nilly, and the government or the government bodies concerned are completely unaware of this. So that's a vulnerability that this container is exposed. As far as I'm concerned, I'm looking at it with a more serious situation. So that's that situation. The other thing that I find suspicious is these cargoes, which I've mentioned the type of cargo, in terms of the container and how, it's transported. A lot of these containers, as I said, they're reefer type. But the other thing you need to know is, I've mentioned that they're water, they're temperature controlled. They're sort of watertight containers which can float for weeks or even months at sea, providing they're not damaged in any way and the water doesn't get inside them. The other thing is they're held down with what you call lugs or clamps. Now, that keeps the container in place so that it doesn't move about when the seas get all choppy and rough and wavy, So that's that you have to bear in mind. But here's the thing. Even if it's a situation where, let's say the seas are really choppy and the seas are rough and a container goes overboard, because they're all clamped down and secured down and fastened down tightly, they're all fastened onto each other. So if one on the top topples over, because you can't topple from the bottom, that's impossible. You can't slide out from the bottom. These containers are metric ton. So, they probably stack them 3 and 4, possibly 5, but let's say about 4 stories, high in terms of containers. The weight of that would be so heavy that the bottom containers wouldn't be able to shift about. It's going to be the top ones that's going to topple over. Now, if the top ones topple over in extremely rough seas, they're all clamped down together like chain. They're all clamps. So if that topples over, it's going to drag all the other columns that's attached in that column. They're all going to go over into the water with it, or at least the top 3, at least is going to topple over into the water, which means you wouldn't see one single container washed up on the beach. It would be several containers washed up on the beach, which, when you look at it logically, that don't make any sense. So the only conclusion I can come to is, if there is no persons like lifeguard or police or anybody else that detected this and sort of, secure the area so that, locals don't get to go at it and ransack it and raid it to take all these potentially contaminated products out of it, then the only other conclusion I can come to is someone put it there, because otherwise there should be several containers there. If it was to go with the paradigm that, all of it, it floated off, it fell off off a ship and floated its way to shore, there would be several containers beached up in that respect, strewn along the beach. So, and that didn't happen. We just see the one. So it looks more like one particular container was planted there. It probably was planted there because, and I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it seems as if one was deliberately put there, but it was put there at a time when the Coast Guard, because like most guards, they do a round in it. They're at one position, you can clock them and say, okay, he's going to patrol this area, and by this time he'll be in another area, or he'll be making his way to another area. This is when them change shift, this is when them take them lunch break or them dinner break. So you'll be able to time it so that when the Coast Guard has left the area, you can, radio in the lorry to come and just dump and drop it off at the beach and then drive off. You understand me? That's the whole my brain is working. That doesn't mean what I'm saying is true, because I'm not going to be like that woman who's ranting and saying a lot of stuff. I'm just saying, when I look at the whole situation, it just doesn't add up. Because if it fell off a ship, you should see several of these containers, because they're all clamped down together. These clamps are thick and massive. Those who drive lorries, know what I'm talking about. I'm not a lorry driver, but I've seen them. I know what these stuff are. They're massive, thick clamps. These containers are metric ton. Metric ton, not your normal ton that you know. These are metric ton containers. So you need some heavy duty, thick steel like clamps to clamp it and hold it in place, because you're not just holding the weight of the container in place. You're holding the movement. If you do physics, it's the movement that add to the weight. It's like when you're flying in a jet, and a lot of people say the G-force add an extra weight to your body as the G-force slush you around inside the cockpit. You understand me? So it's the same thing. When the wave is knocking this thing about, it's some serious weight we're talking about. So these clamps has to be strong, because even an empty container is heavy. Even an empty container, you can't budge it, you can't shift it. It's that heavy. So imagine it's laden full with goods inside. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that. So maybe the authorities, the relevant authorities, can come out and explain how this container reached there, how it, and then the locks that them use, how them get to pry that open. That's not something that you can just use a crowbar and just pry open just like that. They normally lock down and latch down and locked. You know, just kind of close it like you close the door and you don't latch it and lock it down. Otherwise, again, with the high winds at sea and the waves, it can just knock the door open and all the goods them just fly out and just spread all over the water in the sea, in the ocean. So this thing has to be locked down tight, and they're supposed to be watertight too, so that even if it fall over in the water, it can float. So this thing designed to take bashing and all them type of thing, that they're heavy duty stuff. So for these locals to be able to show up, and most of them look like young people and sort of middle old age people that show up, and somehow they manage to just pry the door open and get inside. That just seems very unlikely to me, unless they have some type of industrial heavy duty machinery for cut them way through and open that. So I would go with the theory, if you want to call me conspiracy theorist, that this was put there deliberately. The door was closed but not locked, so it was easy for someone to open it. If not, it probably was already open, and people just able to just run in and just grab these goods with no concern. I think the government at this point, or the relevant MP that control this type of environment, need to come out strongly on television in Jamaica and warn people about this. And even I dare even go as far as to say, anybody caught selling this meat without the proper checks or whatever is liable for some type of fine or jail sentence for it. Because what you're doing is you're putting people live at risk. What if you are the jerky man on the corner Reddy's Road and you are selling this chicken, and then next thing you know you sell it to somebody, and then them eat it now and then them have to rush them to hospital and them lose them life feet, because things like salmonella and E. coli is no joke thing in it. It can take your life. Yeah, it can. You understand me? Now everybody reacts the same for fight off certain infection. And if the wrong person eat this type of meat, them can go in the hospital and come out, you know what I mean, unalive. So, you know, we need to think about that and stop thinking about the money and the freeness and the as Tiger say, the wanga gut and the wanga belly. You know, we have to start to think a little bit more intelligent than that, and a bit more smart about what we do, and think about our families and our own health and our own family. And that's what I have to say about that.